So we have 3 more lightning talks, beginning with Manoj Karki from Washington State University, who I'll welcome up to stage now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm guessing it's still morning. Looks like not. So I'm Manoj Karki from Washington State University, and I'm guessing my slides will be up in a moment. I lead the Center for Precision and Automated Agricultural Systems at Washington State University, where we focus a lot on conducting research around precision ag, automated robotic ag, anything around digital smart farming technologies. Particularly, my program focuses on robotics for specialty crops, such as picking apples and things like that, something we'll be covering. But the center, in general, covers many other areas of precision and automated agriculture. I'm guessing, again, the slides would be up here. Yeah, right there. Are they also coming up in these larger screens? Let's wait another second. I see my slides coming up there, but hopefully it will be helpful if they're up here as well. Oh, over there. So in this quick presentation, I'll be kind of flipping through slides rather quickly to basically briefly showcase what my research program at Washington State University is focusing on. Just to kind of start some conversation down the road in other venues or right after the talk. So let's begin with this picture here and then the next. These 2 pictures were taken some 80 years apart, but other than the color or their lack of in one of those 2, they don't seem to be much different. I mean, we have workers picking this fruit using ladders, climbing up and down these ladders, collecting fruit as they climb up and down the ladders. And when the bags are full, they're emptied onto these boxes. So that's the process. We're harvesting apples perhaps ever since we knew how to build these ladders until now. A little bit more around other farm operations, particularly when it comes to tree fruit crops, such as apples and cherries. We have pruning, we have blossom thinning, we have green fruit thinning, we have pollination. A lot of these operations are dependent a lot heavily on manual labor. And there are some other challenges around, again, efficiently, effectively, and optimally completing these operations in tree fruit crops. Creating this, again, the need for automating these operations. Just to be a little bit more specific about why we want to automate some of these operations, as we can see, as I mentioned earlier, this is not only labor-intensive operation, but also is quite risky and dangerous work for workers. As you can see, this one worker climbing up and down the ladder with that heavy load of fruit, which often leads to accidents. These workers are exposed to cold winter conditions, really hot summer conditions. And these days, increasingly smoky environment during summer when the wildfires are rampant. All those challenges are there, and that's why automation and robotics is important to get into the farming, not only to meet the gap of not having enough people to work in these fields, but also to improve worker health and safety. There has been long research and development. We all perhaps know about it. We have all been discussing about these efforts in the past many decades around developing automation and robotic solutions for farming. However, there is a limited adoption of robotic solutions for these labor-intensive operations, such as fruit picking, fruit tree pruning, vegetable harvesting, all those things. In my opinion, around the development side of it, we still lack Desired accuracy and robustness, we still lack the desired level of speed, which is associated with the cost and complexity of these machines, and which leads to limited adoption, and there is this cycle of higher cost, lower adoption, that is very difficult to break, so that, again, the economy of scale could play a role. There are many other challenges we discussed around the difficulty in adopting these robotic technologies, but when it, again, comes to the development side of it, these are some of the areas we still are limited or lack the desired performance, and that's why these robots, in my opinion, have not made to these farms. So to address some of these challenges around the speed, cost, performance, accuracy, complexity of these machines, at Washington State University, I've been leading this program on agricultural robotics with in collaboration with a lot of great researchers from around the world, including many fine institutions and the colleagues from universities such as Oregon State University. Joe Davidson, my close collaborator, is right there, who presented earlier in the previous lightning round. Carnegie Mellon University, and many other universities and researchers that I'm not going to name all, just to give a quick shout out to them. Our efforts at Washington State University has been recently to develop a robotic system that is not only doing one thing, but multiple different field operations, so that the economic viability of these machines would be higher. We discussed, I think in one of the panels, discussed a lot about startups or researchers often going to one specific operation, that being mostly harvesting, and not focusing on many other operations that happen in various kinds of crops, including what we discussed this morning about strawberries. When it comes to apples and cherries, we have robotic harvesting, certainly a big challenge, a big area of research and development, both in the public as well as private industries. However, we also have needs for developing robotic solutions for pruning and flower thinning and pollination. Also, Dr. Davidson already talked about it briefly around some of that. In my research program at WSU, we've been developing machine vision solutions for all of these operations. For example, here we can see a machine vision system developed for robotic apple picking that would look into fruit, its orientation, where the stem, the calyx are, where the branches are in relation to this fruit, so that we can develop an efficient path to get to those fruit and pick those fruit. Also, identify which fruit are actually pickable, because there are some that are behind trellis wires or branches that we couldn't in any way pick using the robots that we're using. In addition to the vision system for harvesting, we're developing vision system for robotic pruning that includes modules to detect and localize and segment out these various layers of branches, including trunks, primary branches, and secondary branches. And then we're also looking at vision system modules for detecting flowers, delineating flower clusters, and estimating flower density in these orchards, so that, again, our robots could use these outputs to perform robotic operations. Then once we have the vision system, we are integrating robotic systems and taking those into the lab and field evaluations over the last several years. Again, earlier this morning, you saw one example in robotic pruning from Dr. Davidson's presentation. I'll cover some of the other ones that have been going on at our university. Here is the robotic harvesting work that I have been doing for the last 10 years or so. And in recent years, we've been working with this company called FF Robotics. They have this big machine, 12-arm machine, 6 on the left side, 6 on the right side, our efforts and their efforts were joined together about 2018, 2019 timeframe to go for additional funding from state commodity groups as well as federal agencies to develop these kinds of big machines and continue to evaluate this for potential commercialization in recent future. In addition to harvesting apples, I have been collaborating with researchers from University of Central Florida and University of California, Merced. I think Dr. Reza Isani is here in the audience. We've been developing this modular robotic system for strawberry picking. The philosophy here has been to use smaller a number of robots as necessary, depending upon the farm size, to pick these strawberries, which actually addresses one of the questions we were discussing earlier today about large versus small farmings. When we go with these kinds of smaller modular robots, we have the opportunity to serve smaller farming operations as well as larger farming operations, because we could have these cheaper, smaller machines, and the number of those depending upon the size of the farms. In addition to picking, then we're working on robotic system for pruning, which I'm not talking about because you already heard about that this morning. But in addition to those, we are also developing integrated solutions for robotic flower thinning. As you can see in this quick video, we have the vision system provide the location of these flower clusters, and a robotic system getting to those and using a brush to remove a proportion of flowers, so that again we have optimal number of flowers remaining in this canopies for pollination. And then comes the pollination part of it. Here is the system. I'm not going through all of the details about the system, but here is the quick demonstration of how it functions in orchards. We have a novel material to suspend pollens into a solution to keep them viable and allow us to spray that using a nozzle very similar to chemical spraying in a way to targeted flowers. With all those efforts in the lab, we are recently putting all these different kinds of operations into, or trying to put into this same machine that was developed by FF Robotics for robotic picking, so that we have, again, commercial, a system, a full-scale, potentially commercializable system that can do not only harvesting, but many other operations such as pruning, pollination, and thinning. Finally, 2 more slides, and then I'll be done. There is 1 second left. Let's finish it here. Use of bird deterrence drones has been an area of research in my lab, quite successful in deterring birds and keeping these fields safe. And there has been a lot of interest from private companies around this technology, actually, more than any other things that I have demonstrated or discussed so far. And then finally, we recently demonstrated a robotic precision nitrogen application system that can characterize the trees and estimate, or is going to estimate optimal amount of nitrogen. And as it traverses or steers through these orchards, it will locate where the trees are, what would be the characteristics of those trees that were recorded in the past, plus anything that can be sensed right now, and would be applying right amount of nitrogen at right time, at right location. With that, thank you very much, everybody. Sorry for taking a little bit longer, potentially. Here is the contact information and funding acknowledgements. Really appreciate all the funding we've received from various sources. Do I have time for questions, or that will be after the sessions? Any questions? Looks like I can take at least a minute or so. Any questions here? Pretty good. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Tiana Wong? Yeah. Ah. It's up there. It's on the thing. Yep. Yep. Stick around. Only a couple more talks, and they're as you can hear, they're good.
Hi everyone, I'm Tiana from UC Berkeley, and my presentation is about stakeholder mapping of California's precision weeding ecosystem. And to briefly introduce the issue and the research gap, we obviously know weeds are bad, and commonly they're dealt with by applying herbicides. However, because of greater herbicide resistance as well as a push towards organics, particularly in California, hand weeding is now emerging, but it's very, very expensive, particularly because of the state's labor protections, and it's also really like backbreaking work, so this calls into questions concerns about like crew member health and safety. And an emerging solution to these problems is precision weeding, which includes machineries and drones that can selectively weed through mechanical, chemical, or thermal means. And even though they've been proven in a lot of academic settings, their commercialization is still relatively new. And this leads into my central research question, which is how do the relationships between stakeholders in this ecosystem interact with each other, and how does this impact the adoption of this technology on a larger scale? And the sub-research questions relate to the compatible motivations, the collaborative models between these stakeholders, and also the grower user journey. So, how do they first hear about the technology and decide whether or not to use it? And I decided that my research setting is where we are right now, the Central Coast and the Central Valley, because as you can tell, both of these regions have the largest amounts of production as well as farm workers. And they also have the highest amounts of specialty crops, which is what many of the startups are focusing on. My data collection was very social science-y. It was through 18 semi-structured interviews, and I did this by reaching out to potential interviewees through a mix of ways. Actually, by attending this conference last year was really, really helpful, as well as talking to folks like extension specialists and other connectors like that. Thank you. And for the data analysis, I audio recorded all the interviews and transcribed them. And through that, I was able to use the textual data to pull out key themes. And then I created stakeholder cognitive maps, both on an individual as well as a group basis. So I can analyze the relationships both on a micro as well as macro level. And for the first sub-question about compatible motivations, I found that there were 11 of them, and the y-axis shows the number of interviewees who mentioned each theme, and the different colors represent the different stakeholder groups, and by far the most common motivator were labor concerns, which was cited by 3/4 of folks, and many added additional details about the labor pressures or organics, also the competitive labor market, and how precision weeding increases the efficiency of labor. And while no one really says that precision weeding will ever replace hand labor, they just don't think it's realistic, many speculate that growers will be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting with it. And secondly was costs, mainly about reducing the costs of hand weeding. And a lot of people talked about the general idea of transforming agriculture, which is essentially more like long-term visions to increase farm profitability, but people don't really agree on what exactly transforming means. It could be through having additional data or sensors, or more advanced computational abilities or automation, but everyone kind of says different things on what transformation means. And the different colors also show that motivators don't have a consensus, because, for example, growers were the only group that were motivated by the aesthetics of a clean field. And the greater implication of this variance is that startups might not necessarily market themselves correctly to growers compared to how, when they're raising money to VCs, what they talk about, since VCs all talked about environmental sustainability while none of the growers mentioned it. And of course, startups are very reliant on VC funding most of the time, so there may be kind of a different way that they talk to each group that they're working with, which can increase the distrust between growers and startups. Answering the question of collaborative models, this is a very simplified version of my cognitive map. So we went from like 70 concepts to 10 concepts. And the result that interests me the most is some folks talked about how VCs link startups to growers by offering really hands-on ag-related support, which I didn't necessarily expect. And what they meant by this was, first, VCs may match startups with growers for field trials, or they may help build grower advisory boards, or even help with like plot designs and trialing systems. So this is quite different from the traditional role of VCs. And another theme is everyone doesn't really like government very much, or a lot of stakeholders were really skeptical of the state government and the ability of the government to understand grower needs. And this relates to how, in a lot of the literature I read, growers are actually more concerned about climate change related policy, such as increased regulations, as opposed to physical climate change risks, like increased wildfires or temperatures. And many folks agreed that the ideal role of government is as hands-off as possible, because companies should also be able to find success without depending on external support from the government. And the third grouping of results has to do with the user journey. And this tells you that the two most common types of touch points are via connectors, like trade associations, but also through very traditional marketing tactics like cold emailing, LinkedIn, et cetera. And everyone talked about the importance of in-person demos. So either on an ad hoc basis or through trade shows and conferences, since growers are skeptical that startups' technologies is high quality enough to operate in real life conditions, as opposed to very perfect lab settings where you can control all external factors. And another part of my result has to do with all the limitations in how all these stakeholders collaborate with one another. First is startups are really risky because they're very expensive, and most startups fail, which is not good. And these concerns about longevity are intensified since most traditional ag companies have been around for decades and centuries, which is quite different from startups existing for a couple of years. And secondly, there can be an old school mentality amongst growers where they think the true mark of a grower is just putting in the hours on the fields, and they want to own their equipment, which does come in conflict with a lot of revenue-based models that some startups are exploring. So even though literature proves that revenue-based models can decrease costs, of course, and also allow growers to try out the newest, most innovative technologies without having to replace their equipment very often, the barrier for this model to be more widespread and successful is just that growers want to own their equipment, and a lot of startups don't necessarily understand that. And third, there's an issue in terms of a culture difference between growers and startups, since a lot of startups are just founded by fancy PhDs from fancy schools who don't actually have any real-life agricultural experience. So this culture divide can cause barriers that can be combated, from my research, from extension specialists trying to divide that gap, but then also startups being a little bit more proactive after acquisition in terms of offering better customer support and just trying to be more relatable and nicer. So as a quick summary, the main motivators are reducing costs and reducing like labor concerns. And second, VCs connect startups to growers. And third, in-person demos help a lot with conversions, but there are still many barriers to adoption, namely culture-related ones. And of course, my limitations, there are a lot, because this is social science, but my 18 interviews, of course, do not represent the entirety of the ecosystem. And also, I did get feedback that the ag tech investing space is so small that like all VCs know each other, so some folks were just worried about anonymity concerns and like them not offering a diverse or different enough viewpoint. And also, government outreach was difficult because they did have to sign an informed consent form and agree to be recorded, which there's just a lot more red tape to that. And I think future directions that this research can take includes like willingness to pay surveys, as well as examining like public-private collaborations, since I think mainly like that type of research has been done with, why people are willing to pay more for organics, for example, but not really on this level. And I think cognitive mapping can be applied to other ag tech sectors. In my literature, I didn't see any that actually was in the agriculture space. A lot of them was in like sustainable aviation fuel or random other like climate tech sectors. And for my research in particular, I'm interested in quantifying these very qualitative results. So I've been working with my advisor to find ways to, for example, calculate the complexity of each stakeholder map, and also quantifying like which nodes are the most central and important to people. So if any of you guys have any ideas on that or feedback, I'll be very happy to hear it. And that's all. Thanks. Questions or no questions?
I got a question as far as education and training. Did education and training come into, did education and training come into any of the barriers as far as adoption? And if they did, where did they rank as far as in relation to?
Hey, you have to turn it on. There's a button. Turn it on.
Hey, there we go. We're at an ag tech conference, and I'm just learning to use a microphone. So education and training, where did that come into any of your results? And if it did, where did it rank?
Yeah, for sure, it did. I mean, this presentation is only like a third, maybe, of everything I did. And it did rank fairly highly in terms of some startups' technologies you need, or the startup has to have a fleet of trained specialists to use it, and then these startup trained specialists are then deployed onto individual farms, and it becomes really complex, and it creates some like weird hierarchy between the crew members at certain farms. So that part was concerning, or in terms of like using the technology itself. But in terms of like the technology seeming like almost too overwhelming or not meeting the needs of the growers when they first interact with one another, that's where I really saw the role of like extension specialists or more neutral third parties or like trade associations, for example, coming in and trying to link the two together. Thanks.
One more question over here.
Very interesting research. I do have a question. So when you talk to the growers, have they ever mentioned that, did they ever like actively going out and seek digital technologies, for example, like weeding? Do they talk to startups or tech companies themselves? If they do, what is their main source of information? Do they talk to trade association, extension expert like you mentioned, or their grower like other resource?
Yes, for sure. The growers that are interviewed, they may be biased towards more like risky folks, in that they're willing to talk to me and be recorded and all that fun stuff. So a lot of them did actively reach out to the startups themselves, or if they've seen them around at conferences, or for example, like Western Growers has a lot of different like pitch days and startup-related events. So first, there needs to be like constant exposure to these startups first, but then growers do oftentimes are very proactive about it and reach out to the startups directly.
Also, like, sorry, one more question. Do you feel like their biggest motivation, you mentioned a few things, but when you talk to them, did they mention like what would be a biggest motivation for them to actually working or testing some technology on their farm?
Some say that if the startup has other pilots up and running and they've proven that they won't, damage the crops, or, having a smaller scale pilot isn't too risky, then they'll be happy to do it. And some have said that, like, if a pilot doesn't have any cause any economic harm to them, then they're willing to make the sacrifice just to try it out. But, as I mentioned, the folks I interviewed are definitely more on the, progressive pro-tech side of the spectrum. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, one final talk, Alex. Great.
Thanks to all of you who've stuck around. I know we're running into the lunch hour just a little bit. I'll try to be quick. I'm Alex Thomasson. I'm the director of the Agricultural Autonomy Institute at Mississippi State University. Does anybody know where I need to point this? There we go. So very briefly, I wanted to just give you a bit of history on the Ag Autonomy Institute. Mississippi State University is our land-grant institution, 1862 land grant in Mississippi. As such, it has a College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and a College of Engineering, both of which have 8 or 9 departments. Lots of expertise there that informs the ability to do autonomy in agriculture. We also have multiple research centers. You see those 3 listed there. One is CAVS, the Center for Advanced Vehicular Systems, which was developed when a Nissan plant was built in the state of Mississippi, and there was some synergy between the university's research and the automotive world. That center has progressed into doing a lot of off-road autonomy work for DoD, and so there's a lot of autonomy capability there in that center. There are a couple of others that are mostly focused on using drones in agriculture and other aspects, large drones, at the Raspet Flight Research Laboratory. I came to Mississippi State University as department head of the Agricultural and Biological Engineering Department about 3 years ago. And I came in with this vision that Mississippi State had the capability inherently to become a big player in the ag autonomy industry, which I saw growing very rapidly. And so when I got there, I put together this working group that has ultimately evolved to about 40 people. And those people span the breadth of all of those departments and centers that you see there. So lots of different kinds of capability, everywhere from agronomy to animal science to electrical engineering to mechanical engineering and so on from the various departments and centers. We've met monthly over the last 3 years talking about potential for collaboration and proposal opportunities and that kind of thing. And ultimately, I wrote a proposal last year and got some funding from a charitable organization in the state of Mississippi to stand up an Agricultural Autonomy Institute. This year in the summer, we were approved by the Mississippi's Institutes of Higher Learning to create this as a formal university-level institute. And by the way, if any of you will be in our neck of the woods or have any interest in this, we'll be having a grand opening October 26th. Would love to have you. But please reach out to me afterwards and I'll give contact info when we get done. Just very briefly, our organization, that's us in the middle, the Agricultural Autonomy Institute. We report as a university-level center to 2 vice presidents. The 2 above there that you see, one is the vice president for the Division of Ag, Forestry, and Veterinary Medicine. The other one is for the vice president for the Division of Research and Economic Development. Again, as a land-grant institution, we have agriculture, we have engineering in terms of our academic capabilities, and then we also have a research experiment station and an extension service. We are very closely aligned with those, so we have the capability to reach out to extension agents in every county in the state through the extension service. We also have lots of different research facilities around the state. What's our scope? I'll talk about that in 3 different ways. One, in terms of types of machines. We're interested in research and development on conventional agricultural equipment like tractors and combines, unconventional agricultural equipment, including advanced sprayers, small robots, logistics systems, and so forth. and drones, and even teams, and I'll show you a video of this. Hopefully the videos will be working, teams of airborne and ground-based robots. The applications include production, everything from tilling to planting to harvesting and all things in between, but also processing. Mississippi is the #1 producer of catfish in the United States. It's the #2 producer of sweet potatoes. Both of those commodities require a good bit of processing. That processing tends to be dangerous and tedious, and it's hard to find employees, which is driving a lot of autonomy, obviously. We think that autonomy can play a role in processing plants. We're also very interested in autonomy for research. A lot of research that's been done in the phenomics area has sort of moved from having graduate students with notepads and yardsticks walking through the field to having drones go through the field. We think there's a lot of room for growth there, and we're interested in that space as well. Technologies that we can bring to bear involve everything from sensors to artificial intelligence to robotics and mechatronics to simulation to wireless communications and beyond. So what's our focus? What I received the funding for from the charitable organization, which is called the Huron Foundation, in case you're wondering, the Huron Foundation in Mississippi. We base this on doing economic development in the state of Mississippi in 3 ways. And one is internal research and development, the creation of intellectual property in the state of Mississippi at Mississippi State University, but also doing corporate funded research, dealing with innovations in technology that they may be interested in, or testing and evaluation of their equipment that they've developed. Secondly, we want to attract industry. That is in terms of bringing them to do research, bringing them to do manufacturing, distribution, et cetera. And then finally, we're very interested in workforce development. As a land-grant university, we have the capability to put out undergraduate students and graduate students into this field. We're also very interested in working with community colleges to develop students coming out at the more technical level. We've been given some facilities to work with. We have an office space that I won't talk about, but this is the Pace Seed Technology Building at Mississippi State University. We have an office suite there on the upper right. Let's see, right here. This is our office suite here. We have a large lab in the back of the building that's almost 5,000 square feet, where we can do a lot of work with autonomous systems inside. We're currently renovating that space with funds that the university provided when we set up the institute. This is where we'll have our grand opening in a few weeks. In addition to those office and lab facilities, Mississippi State University has the benefit of having a large agricultural research farm immediately adjacent to campus to the north. So I can leave my office and within 5 minutes I can be in the field. We have this field that's been given to us. It's a small field, but it's a very conveniently located field on North Farm, just north of campus, and it's been designated the Autonomous Acres Proving Ground. And our goal is to just have a spot there where we're always doing autonomy, whether it be planting or spraying or anything that we do. And by the way, it's located next to this area, which is the Calves Proving Ground. And I mentioned the Center Calves earlier that does a lot of off-road autonomy for DOD. This is a hilly, forested area. They run their vehicles through that area, looking at different soil types and slopes and obstacles with trees and so forth. And so we really have a nicely located proving ground here right next to the Calves Proving Ground. There's a lot of synergy there. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. I think that'll be it for that. So a few of our activities, we obviously have a lot of collaborative discussions going on with commercial partners, potential commercial partners internally and so forth, a lot of proposal writing going on, and some progressing ongoing projects that we've had in the works with various researchers around. And if I can play any one of these videos, then I can talk through that a little bit. Somebody can help me out, clicking on a video. Here we go. Okay, so this one that we're looking at moving here, this is a teaming system between a ground-based robot vehicle that you see here and a drone. And you'll see this vehicle is traveling from waypoint to waypoint, and it's positioning itself under the overflight of a drone that's flying sort of, it was mentioned earlier, as a lawnmower pattern. It will get to that waypoint, it will stop, and it will wait for the drone to fly back over it. And once the drone has turned back around and is out of imaging range, of this ground-based vehicle, then it will follow on to the next waypoint. The purpose, excuse me, the purpose in this is largely a phenomics-related project. We're interested in very high accuracy data on reflectance and temperature and plant height. And this object on the ground provides us calibration references for all of those things. It has calibration panels on top of it, both for temperature and reflectance, and it's also at a fixed known height that we can use to calibrate our height, our plant height measurements. If I could get this video going real quick right here. This is an internal project that was done on an autonomous robotic cotton harvesting system. Basically, bowl by bowl, a custom end effector was designed for harvesting individual bowls, and it's a camera-based AI system that identifies those bowls and then allows it to pick them. And so these are just some examples of some of the things that have been going on leading up to the start of the Ag Autonomy Institute. Again, just a quick pitch. We've got our grand opening on October 26th at the university. If you'd like to talk to me about that, I would point out Madison Dixon. Madison, if you'd raise your hand. Madison's the associate director of the Institute. Both of us will be here. Madison has a poster in a little while that you can come and talk to him about it, but we'd love to talk to you about this. And finally, this is our contact information. That's me, Alex Thomasson, Madison Dixon, and our program manager is Amberlynn Moore. Email addresses if you want them. Thanks for your attention. I know it's getting towards lunch. I'll be happy to answer a question, or if you want to wait till afterwards and talk offline with me, happy to do that as well. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex.